6. Setting up face-to-face meetings. Now that you've identified and evaluated your leads and built a segmented, limited, and prioritized prospect list, it's time to move on to what many consider to be the most difficult task of the entire sales process, connecting with the prospect. You can do this by using several different channels, which usually work in tandem: phone, email, LinkedIn and other social media networks, in person. Depending on your industry, product, service, and type of prospect you're reaching out to, you will typically try to accomplish one of 4 core connecting objectives: scheduling a face-to-face meeting, either in person or through a video call; increasing awareness of your company and yourself with the prospect. This is especially important for salespeople who work for lesser-known companies or new ventures; gathering additional information about the prospect. This is relevant in industries selling to customers for which few data points are available and can be found during the prospecting phase. For example, companies that sell to very small businesses. Closing a deal. Many industries are driven much more by quantity than quality. For example, an industry selling products that are sold at a low price point and are therefore focused on getting a deal done on the first outreach. Covering all of these objectives would go beyond the scope of this book. We will focus mostly on achieving the first goal, setting up a face-to-face meeting with the prospect, and we'll touch on the second one, increasing awareness, especially during Chapter 11 on social selling and leaving voicemails. Not cold calling again. Of the different ways to connect with a prospect, approaching by phone, commonly referred to as cold calling, is surrounded by the most stigma and is probably the main reason people shy away from a career in sales. Typical sales stereotype portrayed in movies like The Wolf of Wall Street or Glengarry Glen Ross, and even in TV shows like Seinfeld. "Hello, Mr. Farniman, you want to buy a computer? No? Why not?" is that of sleazy salespeople trying to trick their way in the door with a prospect. That is how most people who have never worked in a business-to-business sales role imagine the day-to-day routine of a typical salesperson. Who can blame them? Searching for synonyms for the term cold calling on Google and thesaurus.com will suggest the following 4 expressions: hard sell, sales call, spam, and spit. Yes, it says spit. Over the years, companies have tried to give it different names: proactive calling, money-making calling, and making marketing calls. It's just a short list of these rebranding efforts, none of which ever really stuck. It's less about the label than the activity itself anyway. And let's face it, that activity sucks. Over the years, I've met very few people who claimed to enjoy cold calling, and if someone did, I walked away every single time not believing one word. To be clear, under the term cold calling, we mean calling someone who is not expecting your call in order to initiate a sales conversation and a future client relationship. What makes it cold is that the recipient of your call is not expecting it. Instead, you're interrupting the person's day, and that interruption typically results in some type of initial resistance and potentially a negative response. That's what makes cold calling so hard. But here's the key point. You don't have to enjoy cold calling to become good at it. You just have to commit to it and do it. And when you think about it, cold calling typically doesn't make up more than 10 to 20% of a typical work week. So what if you don't love these cold calling hours? As long as the calls help you enjoy the other 80 to 90% of the week, you should be able to manage. Show me a job that is 100% perfect all the time. It doesn't exist. Hitting your first sales serve. As a former tennis player, I see several similarities between cold calling in an office, or wherever you prefer to do it, and starting a new point on a tennis court, which you do by hitting a first serve. The serve is the one shot in tennis that your opponents cannot influence. You can hit a flat serve, a kick serve, or a topspin serve. You can mix up the speed of the serve. It's all completely up to the server. Only after the player on the other side of the net returns the serve does the rally begin. And at that point, your next shot will be influenced by how your opponent reacted. This is very similar to the situation you're facing when reaching out to a new prospect. It is entirely up to you what you say or write, at least initially. So make it count. I want to come in and tell you how great my company is, or some other product dump will not do and is more akin to double faulting in tennis. Depending on what type of reaction and answer you get from the prospect to your opening, You decide what type of question to follow up with to turn the call into a conversation, or the sales equivalent of a rally in tennis. A typical training session in tennis is mostly spent on practicing ground strokes, forehands and backhands, as well as working on the net game, hitting volleys and overheads. And maybe, only maybe, there will be 5 minutes left at the end of the training session to hit some serves. It is by far the most under-practiced shot in the game. In fact, players who actually did heavily focus on it during practice throughout their careers, like Pete Sampras or Boris Becker, were able to dominate the game by excelling with exactly this shot. Because salespeople don't enjoy cold calling, they don't like to practice cold calling, when it is probably the one activity in sales that allows you to improve your sales performance very quickly, whether by role-playing, reviewing scripts and talking points, and practicing how to handle objections. Qualifying prospects on warm calls. In the sales world, you will sometimes come across the term warm calling. It's commonly understood as the prospect having indicated some type of initial interest, such as filling out a form on your company's website or actively calling in to be connected to the sales department. Of course, gathering information and immediately qualifying the prospect will become the primary objective of such a call. Without dwelling too much on this particular scenario, let me stress the significance of having the confidence to ask fact-based questions on this initial call, like the budget they have available right now, so you avoid wasting time setting up face-to-face meetings with unqualified prospects. One cold call objective. If you work in an industry where the objective of a cold call is to set up a face-to-face meeting, it's essential to set exactly that as your bar of success before you pick up the phone and dial. It's very simple. If you schedule a meeting, in person or on video, your cold call was a success. If you don't, it was not. If your one and only goal is to set up a face-to-face meeting, it's also important to understand what is not a goal. It's not your goal to conduct a thorough needs analysis with your prospect over the phone. It's not your goal to keep your prospect on the phone longer, just to make friends. It's not your goal to sell your solution. You would think this is all pretty straightforward, but it's not. Some salespeople are trying to convince themselves that a call that didn't result in a meeting was still a win. She didn't give me the meeting, but was really interested in what I had to say. I really connected with him on a personal level. He has young kids, and so do I. They are not ready yet from a business perspective, but it was a good start. It could be a good start, but justifying calls that fall short of your goal like that is a very slippery slope that can result in a very successful week of cold calling, at least in your eyes, yet no face-to-face meetings with new business prospects. Be strict about sticking to your objective.